Konnichiwa. Welcome to the Uzumaki Garage. In this week's episode, I'm working on the Mitsubishi Evo 9 wagon. I'm doing some fault finding and I'm upgrading a lot of old parts with the latest offerings from Haltech. A few months ago, I took the Evo wagon for a drive as part of this episode. I was just cruising around the city and recording some footage and warming up the transmission oil. But then all of a sudden it started running rough, there was no boost, and the dash said the air-fuel ratio was 19:1. And if that's true, it's not good, as 19:1 is very lean. So I cautiously drove home thinking that the O2 sensor or its controller had failed and the car was in limp mode. So today I'm removing the O2 wideband sensor, and I'm actually going to remove all the old school Haltech parts and replace them with Haltech's brand new offerings, which will hopefully fix my car's issues, but it'll definitely modernise and simplify my setup. I'm disconnecting the SparkTech connectors from the harness so I can take a look at the spark plugs. The plugs do look a bit rich, so hopefully the engine hasn't run lean. I've reinstalled the spark plugs and tightening them with a torque wrench. I tighten in two stages, first to 20 Nm and then to 29 Nm. And replace the coils. The engine starts okay and the fuel pressure is around 38 psi at idle. The engine isn't running smoothly, but I also noticed the air-fuel ratio isn't stuck on 19:1 anymore, so I think it still points to a fault with the O2 sensor or its controller. Next I'm removing the O2 wideband sensor, which I've had soaking in penetrating oil for a few days. And to get better access, I've already removed the heat shield from the power steering pump. Undo the sensor and remove. I've never changed it since owning the car, so it's from 2014 or before, which would make it a Bosch LSU 4.2. They have a shorter lifespan if used with E85, which I have used but don't at the moment. Now I'll remove all the old school Haltech components from the Evo, including the Elite ECU and harness. some new parts have arrived. This is the new Haltech WB1 wideband kit. It includes the new Bosch LSU 4.9 sensor and the new wideband controller, which goes between the sensor and the Haltech ECU. The controller converts the sensor's signal to the Haltech CAN system for very accurate readings for the ECU. So I'm following Haltech's instructions to attach the red and black wires on this cable into the Elite ECU's harness. The Elite ECU is pretty big, but I hope I can mount it here behind the glove box. I'll make an offset bracket out of aluminium, which will look something like this, and attach it to the dash bar. The Wideband O2 sensor is meant to be installed 1 meter from the turbo exhaust outlet. It's not meant to be in this position, so I'm going to block off this hole, remove the exhaust, and weld in a new bung 1 meter away from the turbo. fed the wideband sensor cable through a hole in the floor on the left-hand side of the car. I kept the cable going straight back towards the seat to keep it flat against the floor, and then along the side of the footwell, below the scuff plate, and finally the connector can sit under the kick panel trim. I'm now attaching the sensor cable to the WB1. Now I'm using the 130022 cable to connect the WB1 to the DTM4 power supply cable. I stuck some foam padding around the dash bar and laid the Haltech adapter harness over it to support its weight. And then I reattached the lower dash trim. I've just used cable ties to hold things in place, then later when I'm sure everything works, I'll make it all neat and secure. My next job is to modify the Haltech dash cable with the Deutsch DTM4 connector. Then I should be able to piggyback the dash cable out of the WB1 to the Haltech dash. But if that doesn't work, I have a new Haltech CAN hub I can set up instead. I've cut off the old connector and now I'm stripping back the wires so I can crimp on the Deutsch connector pins. Here I'm checking the depth of the stripped wire. There's a little hole in the side where you can check to see the stripped wire has gone all the way into the pin. And I want just a little bit of plain wire visible before the installation starts. To crimp these solid pins, I'm using a DTM size 20 crimper. It squeezes in on all four sides at the same time. This tool is also adjustable, so I've rotated the knob on the back so when I drop the pin into the hole, the pin sits flush against this face. I downloaded some info from Haltech so I could work out which wires go where, and push the pins into the connector. And then I installed the locking wedge. And later, after I've checked that it all works, I'll warm up this sleeve of heat shrink. I've put the dash back into position and plugged its harness into the WB1. The last step is to connect to the Haltech ECU to change some settings so the ECU knows the new O2 sensor is a CAN device and it's on the CAN network. First I click the Setup drop-down menu and select Main Setup. Then select the Devices tab, scroll down to the wideband controller boxes and select WBC1. Then select the Functions tab and Wideband O2 1 sensor. Set the input type to O2 sensor wideband, select Edit Connection and select WBC1A and click OK. And now that I'm back at this window, I click Apply and OK. You can see in the bottom right hand corner, a pop-up box says the ECU must now be rebooted. So to do that, I turn off the ignition key, wait for a few seconds, then turn the key back on. And now you can see the new wideband sensor is green and online. I'm now removing the I/O box device from the setup, as I physically removed the device from the car earlier in this video, and rebooted the ECU again for the settings to take effect. Then I save the tune to the hard drive. disconnected the PC, and closed the ESP software. I reconnected the coils harness and cranked it over. I pulled out the old spark plugs and replaced them with a new set. Then I noticed the coils weren't right. One coil was 10mm longer than it used to be. The insides have popped out. You shouldn't be able to see that orange seal. I bought a new set of genuine Denso coils from Jeff at JDM Motorsport. And then I put some dialectic grease on the ignition coil's spring where it contacts the spark plug. I'll leave the coil mounting screws loose until the mounting plate is attached to the valve cover and the coils are lined up with the spark plugs. I connected to the car's ECU and found there was only one dwell duration target of 6.3 milliseconds. Mark at M&W Ignitions told me that 6.3 milliseconds would oversaturate the coils and cause them to get super hot. Mark suggested some new values for my ECU's dwell time. So I created a table with 8 voltage columns, clicked apply and OK. Then I overtyped the dwell time fields with the new values for the corresponding voltage. I reconnected the coils harness and cranked it over. Wow, that was a big episode, but it's great to get all this work finally done on the Evo. It now starts easier, it runs a lot smoother, and it doesn't stall after the first startup. The warm-up idle speed's a bit high, but I'll ask my tuner to fix that when he gives the car a checkup and upgrades it to the new Haltech NSP software. I installed a few new Haltech parts and removed a lot of old electrical things that were either outdated or faulty. The new O2 sensor is now in the correct location on the exhaust, and I set it up as a CAN device in the Haltech ECU. I modified my dash cable so I can still use my old Haltech dash to keep an eye on things while I'm driving. And I did remove my injectors to check that they were clean because I have used E85 in the past. I installed new spark plugs and a new coil and plug ignition system and set up the dwell times for the coils in the Haltech ECU. Thanks for watching all the way to the end, but before you go, click that like, subscribe and notify buttons and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.